Hey, welcome back. I'm Ferrikster, here to bring you some more Pokemon Go GBL battles. These battles are played in Hisui Cup. I will just be calling it H Cup because Hisui Cup is kind of hard for me to say. I don't know why that is. So, where was I for the last week? I was in Seattle. If anyone was wondering why you didn't get a team composition or a video for Little Cup Remix, it's because I kind of barely played it at all. I was in Seattle. I went there to meet my Sylph Factions team and meet a bunch of other creators. I got to meet Trainer Tips and I don't know, Yasser, Nisus, a lot of the people who are Twitch streamers and on my, not as many YouTubers, mostly streamers. I think there's just more of them, or I just know more of them. Probably that. I know more of them. But regardless, I had a really nice time. Visited some friends that I had out there also, who showed me around a little bit, and overall, I had a pretty neat time. But the trip was like a little expensive in terms of just having to have a flight and and splitting an Airbnb with some of the other creators. Mostly just to get a shiny Snorlax with a hat. So. Shiny Snorlax with a hat content maybe coming up someday so that it feels worth it. I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. I went there to have a good time. Didn't actually go there for the shiny Snorlax. But for anyone who did, I hope it was worth the $900 plane ticket or however much you paid for it. Just if that's all that I had gotten out of the experience, it would have been terrible. Thankfully, I had a really great time meeting everybody. But so that's why I didn't really play Little Cup Remix. That's why I'm not really that highly ranked right now. Just going for an entire week without playing, and I wasn't particularly high up before then either. But yeah, so I guess let's climb. So I built this team for H Cup. I am running Frostlass with Hisui Electrode, Electrode, and Toxicroak in the back. And the meta for this cup, by the way, is eerily similar to Sinnoh Cup that we had a while ago. And I actually was told that my Sinnoh Cup team works just fine still by someone who had used it to hit veteran for the first time. So congratulations to, I forget who it was. Damn, I should have checked so I'd be able to complete this anecdote with some degree of competence. Alas. So yeah, my old Sinnoh Cup team, I'm told, still works fine. So, I will link that in the description below. It's not the most relevant linked video I'll have ever placed, but yeah, told it still works. So if you don't have the mons for this, maybe you have the mons for that, it'll be another choice. So a lot of the complaints that we got about Sinnoh Cup when it was out, and now H Cup, now that it's out, is that the meta feels very rock, paper, scissors. It's very RPS. So, we have Frostlass, Bastiodon, we've got fighters. There's a lot of things that hard counter some things and get hard countered by others. So anytime we have a meta like that, I usually suggest that if you're going to walk into a rock, paper, scissors fight, bring a sponge instead. Because if you just go into a rock, paper, scissors fight with rocks, papers, or scissors, you're going to get hard countered a lot and hard counter other things a lot. And it's nice, but you're kind of relying on the luck of who you're pairing into in order to climb. And if you bring instead a sponge, you're not really super sure how that interacts with rock, papers, or scissors. Probably depends on if the sponge is wet or not. And, you'll have some flexibility that you wouldn't have if you brought teams that were more just, hard countering things and getting hard countered. So in an effort to make a team that felt kind of spongy, I am leading with Frostlass. Frostlass is really, really good in this cup. I have Hisui Electrode in the back, which is a nice core breaker for a lot of things also. Hisui Electrode goes about neutral with Bastiodon, which is fantastic. It has win conditions against Frostlass. It goes mostly even against fighters. So overall, I'm really, really happy with it. Other notable sponges would be Munchlax, which is pretty good, even has some play against the fighters. And Bibarel, which same thing as, it beats Bastiodon in a lot of cases, is a decent wall to Frostlass, has play against most of the other flyers, and is pretty weak against fighters, but can at least force a shield out of them. And of the fighters, like Lucario, Toxicroak, I tend to prefer Toxicroak just because it's the fighter that beats the other fighter, and, it still does a fine job hard walling Basti, except, it doesn't take super effective damage from flamethrowers. So I also have a rank 1 Toxicroak, so, if there's a cup where I can use it, I'll make some amount of effort too. That does mean, of course, that my Toxicroak will lose a lot of CMPs. And that doesn't really matter as much for Toxicroak because it's in the back, although, notably, my Frostlass does not have really great IVs. It's like rank 111 or so it wins CMP against most of the other Frostlasses. I don't usually advocate for going for worse IVs or specific IV spreads, but if you are in a condensed meta where you're much more likely to end up in a mirror, then it does, in my opinion, pay to use a Pokemon with worse IVs. So if you've got a Frostlass that's like rank 200-ish, but it comes very, very close to 1500, I would suggest using that over like a rank 1 or something, just because in a Frostlass mirror, winning CMP is a lot more important than having slightly more bulk. And there will be a decent amount of those mirrors and a decent amount of other positions where you might want to win CMP. So just a quick note about the Pokemon that you're going to be leading with. If you're leading with it, if you're leading with it especially, recommend going with worse IVs. So I guess that's enough notes. On to casting these games. So in this game, oh my gosh, I actually just made a huge mistake in this game, which was not throwing my Wild Charge faster so that my opponent was able to get additional farm. Like, there are going to be a lot of times when you're running Hisui Electrode where you have to identify when you're not going to be able to reach a move and when it makes sense to throw the Wild Charge earlier to reduce the amount of farm that you get. That is actually one of the areas where I am weakest with on this team. In this particular match, I think that definitely did a lot of harm because if Gallade had gotten one less confusion, my Frostlass wouldn't have had to take that Leaf Blade, would have been a lot healthier, and I wouldn't have had to kind of insta-swap out because it was already low, which 100% ended up dooming me in this game regardless. So, yeah, I super lost this one, but yeah, as just the last note before I go into casting, important to identify when you're going to be able to reach another move with Electrode and when you're not, because you have options for what you can do when you've identified that, and that's actually one of the things I really like about it. That presents options. So next game, safes and a Shadow Abomasnow safe swap. So anytime I see something like this now, it makes me feel like, yes, they're trying to bait out the fighter. There's probably something in the back that's going to hard wall that, there is probably a Bastiodon or something in the back, but I can't really avoid it because Toxicroak is my only good answer to an Abomasnow, and there's actually a Drifblim in the back instead, which comes out and, is going to kind of wall Toxicroak's energy. So there wasn't really any reason for me to leave Toxicroak healthy, so there was no reason for me to, shield other than just to maintain alignment. Although if I had known there was a Drifblim back there, I wouldn't have bothered maintaining alignment because both of my Pokemon are really good against Drifblim. Here I'm going to send out Electrode. I know they're very likely to blind throw something, and Electrode will be able to easily survive a super effective Icy Wind or a neutral Shadow Ball, whereas Frostlass would get KO'd from a Shadow Ball. So I would have been forced to shield, so made more sense there. And yeah, since I already knew there was a Toxicroak back there, I just swapped my Frostlass in to start getting some farm. I'm able to force both shields against this Toxicroak, and here I'm going to let this go because if this is a Mud Bomb, it won't do enough damage. Mud Bomb hits for neutral, and Sludge Bomb hits for super effective, but Sludge Bomb still hits Frostlass harder. So if you are the Toxicroak in this situation and Mud Bomb's not going to be enough, throwing the Sludge Bomb would actually have KO'd. I mean, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because Electrode was, had enough energy that I'd be able to nuke both of those Pokemon, so I was going to win that match regardless, and I still had a shield, but, it wouldn't have been able to throw that last Avalanche with Frostlass if they had thrown the Sludge Bomb instead. So I managed to take that game. Slightly positive set, but I'm still kind of getting a hang of this team, especially Electrode. Into this next set. Frostlass into Magnezone. So this is terrible for Frostlass. But Electrode actually is kind of a wall to Magnezone, so I'm really not sure why my opponent is staying in here. I reach 100 energy, and that's when they decide to throw their first Wild Charge. So I am fine with that. Electrode double resists electric, so I'm resisting it as much as a ground type would, with both electric and grass single resisting it. And I also single resist steel, so there's really nothing that Magnezone can do to really hurt Electrode. So here my opponent swaps out now that I managed to throw and lose CMP, so I was able to force a shield, and now Cresselia comes out, and here is another opportunity where I should have thrown both of my Wild Charge faster because I wasn't going to reach an additional one. So, this Cresselia got a little bit more farm than I would have preferred, probably only by maybe 1 or 2 Psycho Cuts, but, while it probably doesn't matter in this match, there would definitely be lots of matchups where it did matter, especially in that last set where it 100% did. So here I'm kind of committed to farming the whole way down. They swap out into Magnezone, and I could have thrown a Shadow Ball, but I think it would not quite have KO'd. So, I didn't want to run the risk that maybe they would end up just no shielding and surviving. So I opted to just swap into Toxicroak. I have a bunch of energy on Frostlass, and they still have a shield, so I figured it'd make sense to just build up some energy on Toxicroak also, because Toxicroak's energy is pretty good also. And there's actually a Togekiss back there. In retrospect, it would have been safer for me to just throw something, because if there turned out to be a Drifblim back there to wall Toxicroak's energy, I would have been farmed down and they could have built up enough energy. It maybe wouldn't have made the most sense as a team comp, but it could have been back there. So throwing the Shadow Ball would also have been fine. Worked out fine regardless, but just managed to take that game, getting some good value out of Toxicroak after all. All right, Frostlass into Shadow Drapion. This is a pretty bad matchup for Frostlass, and when it turns out it had Bite, it was an even worse match. It actually became a way worse matchup, because Frostlass can survive a crunch, but the Bites are doing devastating damage, and they also charge really slowly, so swapping out into Electrode faster maybe would have made more sense. Obviously, Toxicroak is the hard wall to Drapion, resisting pretty much everything that they throw except for, Aqua Tail. I ended up shielding a Fell Stinger, but it was the right move anyway, because it hits for super effective, and it enabled me to reach 2 moves. Here, I don't even know why I tried to throw it. I should have just not thrown a Thundershock. That was actually really dangerous. If I had gone down without getting to throw that, would have been in a much worse spot, sort of. I could have waited out my switch clock a little longer before sending in Toxicroak, but didn't, so I end up taking some extra Mud Slaps and throwing a Mud Bomb, and then swapping out into Frostlass afterwards. Even here, I'm able to reach my last Avalanche, and that is going to be enough to take out Gastrodon after Gastrodon took all that counter and Mud Bomb damage from Tox, and I can just bring Toxicroak back out and just hard-walling Skuntank. I don't know what my opponent does, by the way, against a Toxicroak lead or even a Gastrodon lead. That team seems really inflexible and dangerous to use, but it definitely works well enough for some things, I'm sure. I don't know. All right, so Frostlass Mirror. So again, my Frostlass, not the best ranked, so I'll win a lot of CMPs. Winning CMP is the most important thing for Frostlass in the lead. It enables me to throw that Avalanche, and it's really super risky for my opponent to no-shield. Whereas now that I threw my first move, it's a lot less risky for me to no-shield. So winning CMP, absolutely pivotal. All the same, it means they're going to be able to throw a second Avalanche, and I am just going to shield that. Wasn't trying to throw right away. I'm just going to build up a little bit of extra energy, and I throw this as they are getting the energy for their last Avalanche. It is 6-6-5 Powder Snows into Avalanches, so 6 for the first, 6 for the second, and the third one comes out a little bit faster. Gonna throw the Avalanche at this Toxicroak, and unfortunately I'm just barely not able to make it to my next move. So this Toxicroak has some energy, so I am actually going to send an Electrode. For some reason I don't get my Snuck move in there, which is total BS, but it happens. And I'm sending out Electrode because Electrode will be able to reach the charge move faster, and I didn't want my Toxicroak to, end up having to shield a Mud Bomb and get outpaced to another one. I know that Tox had a lot of energy, and my Toxicroak loses CMP. Turns out there was a Lucario in the back, so that was Frostlass Double Fighter. Pretty inflexible. It's an RPS team for an RPS meta, but, if you're running the right kind of sponge and play well, you can definitely outplay. So, Bastiodon lead. Bastiodon lead is obviously really, really terrible for Frostlass. They come out with a Togekiss, and that is pretty bad for me. I also could have thrown my Wild Charge a little bit earlier once I identify that I'm only going to be able to reach 2, just so they'd get in less Charm. Like, I have 3, like, Thunder Shocks over what I needed to throw. Like, I probably could have built not even up to both of my Wild Charges before throwing the first one. Just so that maybe this Togekiss wouldn't have reached the Ancient Power right away. I end up just, like, throwing this probably a little bit too late. Like, probably shouldn't have tried to build up to 2 before throwing, because I didn't end up making it anyway. Now I'm forced to just insta-swap out into Toxicroak. I have a shield advantage, but this isn't the best position. If this was Bastiodon double flyer and there was a Drifbloom left over in the back, I would have just gotten hard countered, triple hard counter, and I wouldn't have been able to outplay here. Luckily for me, this is some BS fast move beatdown team, modified grass / charm hole. So Toxicroak, kind of a wall to traditional grass hole in that it beats Bastiodon and also, beats Razor Leafers. So able to take that game, and that is a GG. But just I don't know, man. Like, I'm sorry, it's not my style of team. Fast move beatdown teams, I feel like those are terrible. But I mean, it's just sometimes you just want to retire your brain for a while and tap to win. I guess I understand. So Frostlass into Cresselia. I like to let the first move go. Frostlass is really, really strong against Cresselia. I figured maybe, since I wasn't that highly rated, a Shadow Ball would be enough to KO. Like, maybe the Cresselia's IVs weren't good enough, but nope, still good enough to survive there. So I am just going to throw this Avalanche. Like, you have to throw 2 moves to take out a Cresselia regardless, right? So you could just go double Avalanche. Like, that would be fine. And now I am going to shield what turned out to be a close combat. Thankfully, I wasn't getting Leaf Blade baited. And now I'm just going to throw this first Wild Charge, and they are going to be able to reach another Leaf Blade and force me to shield here if they decided to throw. They did, so I'm actually going to shield this Leaf Blade. And I'm going to throw this Wild Charge as soon as I have it, because I'm not 100% sure I would survive that confusion, although I am like 90-something% sure. Managed to KO that Gallade. There is an Empoleon in the back. This is actually really bad for me. Like, they have 2 Waterfalls of Energy. I swap out at 5, and thankfully they were throwing right away as soon as they had it. They actually were kind of in a position where they had to, because if they didn't, my 2 counters, I would win CMP with my Mud Bomb, maybe, and be able to just KO them. Obviously, I have to let this Moonblast go, and I have to leave myself with a Mud Bomb. I barely survive that, and I'm able to throw this Mud Bomb. They get their move through because, you're supposed to. So if this doesn't KO, I 100% am going to die, but it just does. I think it actually does about 60% damage, so it's not even that it just barely does. It just does. The Mud Bomb KOs the Empoleon. I'm able to take that game. That is a GG. But that was a really, really dangerously close game. So I go 5 out of 5, and I get myself a Dialga, and that is delightful. Definitely still would love to have a second hundo of that. I have 1 hundo that I can max to level 50, if I get enough candy and dust. Candy and dust aren't the easiest things to come by. But, getting the encounters from GBL definitely helps, and I go up to 27, 70-something. All right, into this next game. Or into this next set, rather. So, Frostlass into Gastrodon. This is a mostly positive... this is actually a pretty strongly positive matchup. My opponent swaps out into Empoleon, and for whatever reason, I send out Toxicroak, and I don't actually send out Toxicroak fast enough. If you're going to save swap if you're going to counter swap Toxicroak into Empoleon, you're supposed to do it really fast so that you can outpace to the Mud Bomb and force them to either throw a shield or just, let it go and get, and come out and farmed out. But, like, that was from my last team when I didn't have a way harder response. Like, now I have a better response. Also, notice I'm throwing Sludge Bomb instead of Mud Bomb because Sludge Bomb does slightly more damage. So if you're only going to be able to throw 1 move, even if Sludge Bomb is single resisted, Mud Bomb hits for neutral, it still makes more sense. And there's a Bastiodon on the back, which is, like, really obvious, right? Like, come on, Ferrikster, Like, they safe swap Empoleon, probably double steal. Hopefully I don't make this mistake again in the very next game. So, yeah, here we get to see Electrode into Bastionon. So, thankfully, they are shielding the first energy balls, which kind of does make sense. I mean, energy ball actually, this actually doesn't make sense. So, energy ball has a base damage of 90 and hits Bastionon for single, no, not single, just hits for neutral because it's super effective to rock and resisted by steel, so hits for neutral. And Wild Charge has base 100 damage, and, you know, also both of those have stab, and it also hits for neutral. So Wild Charge does slightly more damage, so if you're the Bastionon, it makes more sense to actually save your shield for later, and there I just, wanted to... I'm forced to farm the whole way down because I can't throw anything. End up throwing this energy ball at the Gastrodon, but their fast move registered anyway, and I'm just barely able to Thunder Shock down. So that was barely a GG, but like, oh man. Like if I had played that better, it would have been a lot easier. If my opponent had played better in the end, I would have lost. So both of us misplayed that pretty badly, but this is still pretty early. So I'm pulling on safe swap, and I immediately swap out into my Electrode. And here I make a mistake, right? Which is I CMP it, thinking that Electrode wouldn't CMP, and it actually doesn't, which is hilarious. So I decide to no-shield the Drill Peck. Because Drill Peck hits for neutral, and, it doesn't really do that much damage. Electrode is actually sort of tanky, right? Unfortunately, that means that I'm not going to be able to reach two other moves, and I also make another mistake, which is building up all this excess energy, and I'm not going to be able to reach the Wild Charge. So I should have thrown my Wild Charge earlier, so Empoleon would get less farm. And I also should have just thrown my first Wild Charge immediately, so that if they wanted to shield to maintain switch, or to try to win swap, I could Mirror Shield, because then I would be able to outpace anyway. And it's not like, debuffing myself would, enable them to fast move me down. So didn't really play that swap out as well as I could have, and now, as a result, I have Toxicroak lined up with Cresselia, and my Frostlass is lined up with a Bastiodon. So that's far from ideal, but luckily for me, I did, come away up enough shields. Toxicroak is able to counter down Empoleon, and now there's just one thing left over in the back, and it is a Bastiodon. I'm forced to throw this Mud Bomb on alignment, so they get their Snuck move in, which is going to KO me, but the Mud Bomb hits for double super effective, and the counters were adding up an awful lot. I'm able to reach this Shadow Ball. I'm forced to insta-throw it because I'm not sure I would survive that last Smackdown, and it just barely is able to take out this Bastiodon. Luckily for me, that Bastiodon doesn't actually have the best IVs. Like, Basti definitely gets thick enough that it could survive that. But, yeah, me playing that better also would have made that an actually really, really easy, straightforward victory. Like, against Empoleon safe swap, I just need to swap out Electrode right away and throw the Wild Charge immediately. Did I learn? I did not. So here in this game, I did not learn yet, but I did decide to play this slightly differently, which is shielding the Drill Peck. So now I'm going to build up to like 100 energy, which is where I am now. And then I am just going to throw the first Wild Charge. And if they decide to shield it, I'll be able to reach two more of them, and I will definitely be able to force my way into switch advantage here. Bastiodon comes out, so I now know what the opponent has, and that is fine for me. I'm just going to throw this energy ball. I get the defense drop, and they also shielded, which is amazing for me. There's actually only a 10% chance of defense drop, so I'm definitely getting pretty lucky with those. Second energy ball going out, and now I'm just going to barely be able to reach my last Wild Charge, so this was actually timed out really well. Gonna land that second Wild Charge, and that does a lot of damage. Bastiodon has energy, but like not really enough health, and yeah, Toxicroak can easily survive, and Toxicroak has basically no play against the Drifblim, but my Frostlass already had some of an energy lead, and this Drifblim would get outpaced by a Frostlass even if we were both energy dry, so I'm easily able to reach this Avalanche. I even throw one extra. For some reason they weren't throwing as soon as they have it. Actually, I think they might not even have the Shadow Ball yet, so just going to take them out with the Avalanche, and I am able to Powder Snow the Bastiodon down. That is a GG. So, yeah, maintain it against Bastiodon lead if I'm able to just force against Empoleon safe swap. If I'm able to force switch advantage and there's a Bastiodon on the back, and there most likely is, then it's just a really much cleaner victory. So, yeah, especially important if there's a Drifblim lead. like Driftbloom Double Steel is a very common team. So it's actually just very important with if there's a Driftbloom lead and then Polion safe swap, just send out Electrode immediately, and I would say it makes the most sense to throw your charge move right away. Like just throw the first wild charge as soon as you have it, because you'll, as long as you get it out before Empoleon is forced to shield, and you're still able to build up to back and throw both other wild charges to force your way into switch advantage, no problem. So here I throw my first wild charge off of alignment. So if they wanted to shield, I'd be able to win CMP and throw my second one, force my way into dropping both of their shields. And now I'm gonna let this go. The Ironhead actually doesn't KO. I think maybe they undercharged that and they're able to get a confusion in. Frostlass would kind of have difficulty farming down here, so I decided to send out Toxicroak instead. Like, I'm going to take one Confusion, which is double super effective and does a lot to Toxicroak. But, I mean, I already knew there was a Gastro on there and that the Gastro was probably going to come out. So, since they did send that out, I'm just going to shield this Body Slam. And I am actually just going to farm the whole way down. And find out what's in the back. It is a Frostlass. Here I make a weird decision, which is to stay in and throw my first Mud Bomb. I had energy on my Frostlass. I could have just sent my Frostlass out immediately and easily reached the Shadow Ball. I don't know why I'm opting to misplay this terribly. So since I'm already kind of, in this predicament, I decided to go for a CMP on the Avalanche. Luckily, I do win CMP. I mean, I say luckily, but that's also kind of by design. They undercharge completely, so now they're only one away, but I'm able to get to... I was also only one away from my Mud Bomb, and Toxicroak wins CMP against most Frostlasses, even my rank 1. So able to reach that last move against this Frostlass, but that was terribly misplayed, and I could have had a very much cleaner win if I just swapped out to Frostlass as soon as their Frostlass came out. I don't know why. It's like I didn't remember that I had energy or something. So Frostlass Mirror in the lead. My Frostlass tends to win CMP. This one is throwing at 6, so this is either an Avalanche or, bad for me, it is a Crunch Frostlass, and they get the defense drop, which is terrible for me. So I am just gonna, build up to plenty of energy and throw my Avalanche. Luckily, my bait is successful and I get a shield. I make it to the Shadow Ball. My opponent has excellent counting, recognizes it, and also this Frostlass has even worse IVs than mine because it wins CMP against me also. So ended up having to shield that. I decided to shield and then throw the Shadow Ball. I was hoping maybe they would just let it go, but they didn't, but that's fine. Now they have their one thing, so they could have thrown an Avalanche here. I'm not sure why they didn't. But I mean, Electrode would have won CMP anyway and gotten the wild charge. Like, they could have thrown a Crunch for sure. It's possible they're running Crunch Shadow Ball, which I guess would make some sense for some things also. Empoleon left over in the back. I could have thrown my wild charge and then, like, actually, no, wait, sorry. I could throw my wild charge. Definitely a right move to send out my Toxicroak, because now I'm just going to counter the whole way down. Gastron's going to come back out. It's going to be able to do a ton of damage and just kind of, farm my Toxicroak the whole way down. But that's okay, because, I left with a move stored on my Electrode. So as soon as I come out, I'm just going to spam out the energy ball, and I'm going to manage to take that game for a very clean 5 out of 5. So, altogether, I think I went like 11 in a row with this team after botching 2 of my earlier games, getting some practice in. So the team definitely seems to be very strong. I think I'm getting a good hang of it, and I'm starting to recognize and be able to quickly identify some of the opposing teams that are common. So, I think this team is really strong. It is definitely a nice, spongy team for a very RPS meta. So, hope you enjoyed this content. Don't forget to do the things you're supposed to do at the ends of videos. You know what you're supposed to do at the ends of videos. Helps me out a lot. And, yeah. I guess I'll see you when I see you. Oh, and I go up to like 28 and some change. So, I guess Legend soon. I'll see you when I see you.